Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. How do you find balance in caregiving? Whether you know from personal experience or through someone else in your life, you'll want to listen to this episode with Kelley Coleman. Kelley Coleman is the mother of two boys, one of whom has multiple disabilities, including a rare genetic syndrome, cerebral palsy, autism, CVI, epilepsy, and more. Her book, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child, Your Guide to the Essential Systems, Services, and Supports, offers practical tips for parenting a disabled child. This episode is part 2 of our conversation, and we discuss tips for parents going out in public with their disabled children, the role of community support, how to find balance between juggling the paperwork and still enjoying being a mom, insights for policymakers, empowering parents with expertise, and encouragement for parents who are just starting on their journey of disability. In this episode, discover what's possible when challenges are weaved with joys. And now I present you Kelley Coleman. All right, let's talk about some kinds of tips for parents. One common struggle I've heard from parents is going out in public. How do you manage the world around you while also protecting your own mental health and well-being?
I love that you asked about being out in the world, being out in the community, because that is an essential part of everyone's life. And for so many families, they really don't leave the house much, or they really only go to school and therapies with their child. Our son, for example, he is loud and proud with all the things of who he is. And when I say loud, I'm underlining that several times. We go to the grocery store and he loves the lighting situation by the lettuce. So he runs to the lettuce and he is cheering and squealing very loudly. And he will do the same when we are walking down the street for buses or trucks or maybe any car, which is a lot of squealing. And in the early years, I caught myself apologizing for my son being who he is out in the world. And one day, I was sort of horrified to realize my son was growing up hearing me apologize for who he is. And he's not actually doing anything wrong. You know what? The lighting is exciting over here. Let's go cheer for the lettuce. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to take up the whole aisle at Costco because you need to dance, you know what? You dance. That's cool. And I got myself in the habit, which absolutely took effort. If my kids are doing something wrong is a different story. If they're not doing anything wrong, and you get the looks, you might get people saying something to you instead of saying, oh my gosh, he's so loud in this grocery store. I'm so sorry. It puts you and your kid in this weird victim space. But if you say, you know what, this lighting situation is awesome. Thank you for understanding. This is how he expresses his enthusiasm. Thank you for understanding. Yes, it is going to take us a really long time to walk from point A to point B because that's how he rolls. Thank you for understanding. It would take a real jerk for someone to say, I do not understand. Like, be human here. So I've learned to not apologize if my kid isn't doing anything wrong and to really take my cues from him. There are times when he is not comfortable being in a certain space. The crowd or the noise or whatever the situation is might be too much for him. And in situations like that, I ask myself if that is necessary. Taking him to an amusement park, probably not necessary and not fun for him. I don't have to do that. If there's a situation, maybe going to the doctor's office might create overwhelm, have some meltdowns. But when that is necessary, I think in advance about what are the accommodations that we can make. Can the doctor have a conversation with him in the hall before we go into the exam room? Is there any paperwork that I can fill out in advance, the accommodations that we can think of in advance can make all the difference in this experience for our child. It is a lot of thinking and rethinking and thinking in advance, but when the interactions go well and your child wants to keep doing these things, it is just life-changing in the best ways.
Mhm. Yeah, and so it's important for parents to just not be afraid, right? To just not keep their kids at home in fear of what people are gonna say, what people are gonna think.
Absolutely, and I get that it is often hard for us to not care about what other people are saying and thinking. And especially in this conversation, to acknowledge it is very often a different experience when the disabilities are visible versus when they are not visible. My kid, you can look at him and pretty easily and rightfully assume that he is disabled. And people in the world very often award him an amount of grace that isn't necessarily given to my friend's kid whose disabilities are very real but are not visible. People look at this kid and the behaviors in public and are telling the mom to control your child and you need to do this and you need to do this. And in reality, this parent is doing an amazing job and they are fostering inclusion by teaching their child how to be out in the community. And I think those can often be the most challenging situations to confront. And for ourselves as parents, we need to think in advance. Is that a possibility? Oftentimes, yes. And what can we do to best protect ourselves and protect our own mental health? And that will look different for each person. But I think even just anticipating that could happen allows us to kind of let the air out of the balloon a bit so that we're ready to handle it in the moment.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of community, what role do friends and extended family and neighbors play in supporting parents who have disabled children? Like, how can they step up and be that person to lean on?
The extended community all around us is so important, so essential. I love that you said neighbors. We have a kid who cheers and squeals so loudly for every single airplane that passes by. We're in the flight path of a small airport, so that's a lot of airplanes. And our neighbors just saying things like, I love when he does that, and I wish I was that happy about anything, rather than, whoa, he's loud, allows us to really feel like, oh, we are supported by our neighbors. I think acknowledging, hey, I see that your kid is doing things differently. And hey, I've noticed that your kid likes to hold something when he's out on walks. So here's a box of small things he can hold when he's out on walks. Tangible things like that. But even more so, anyone can see that we are moving through life differently. And it's okay if you don't know what you can do to be inclusive, to be supportive, to be helpful. You don't know what is appropriate to do or to say. It is so wonderful when someone says, hey, I want to be on this journey with you. I want to support you. I want to support your family, both of your kids. I don't really know what that looks like. So I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to offer things. You tell me if you need that. Can I buy you a fancy coffee? Cool, I'll buy you fancy coffee. Saying, I want to be there for you. I want to be supportive to you. Even if you don't know what that looks like, it starts a conversation so that if I know, oh my goodness, I do not have time to go to the grocery store and we have no food in the house. Hey, my friend who said she will do anything. You know what? Can you go to the store and get us three things? Would be awesome. And people are really so often willing and excited to do these things to be supportive. But first, people need to open that door and just say, I want to be here for you. Let's figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a neighbor upstairs who also has a young baby, and A few weeks ago, I was by myself. My husband was out of town that weekend, and I just was feeling this level of burnout and exhaustion, just solo parenting an 8-month-old and
Yes.
with a dog. And my neighbor had offered to walk the dog if I needed to. And I'm getting better at asking for help, but I do have this attitude of I can do it, I can do it. I just know I'm fine, I'm fine, you know. But there was that moment that night where I was just like, I can't, and that's okay. And they offered, and so they probably want to help me. And sure enough, without hesitation, they came right down and, took the dog out for me. And I was just able to breathe without having to manage the baby in the carrier and the dog in one hand and like fighting off the other dogs with the other hand. and
Yes.
and I
Yes.
think a lot of parents need to hear that, that it's okay and it's actually going to make you a better parent for your child in that moment if you're able to breathe a little bit and not be so overtaken by emotion of all that's going on.
Mhm. I love that you brought up that super specific example of walking the dog, 'cause holy cow, that can make the difference. And to add to that, I would say start by practicing noticing when you are maxed out, noticing when you cannot do another thing. And you're like, If I load the dishwasher right now, I will have a full meltdown." Don't load the dishwasher, it's fine. Um, but just start by noticing those moments, and once you start recognizing that in yourself, then can start recognizing, "I could use an extra set of hands right now." You can use the word help, you could not use the word help, just say, "I wanna take you up on your offer. Here's what I need." And know that you will be that person for someone else. So rather than thinking of it as, "I am taking help," no, you are actually being part of a circle that it is coming back to you, and you will be walking someone else's dog, and you will be so happy to be able to do that and be there for people.
Oh, yeah. I like that perspective. So, how do you find balance in all of the paperwork and still finding time to enjoy being a mom?
I love that you use the word enjoy, because we should enjoy parenting and our kids and ourselves and lives. And when there is the stack of paperwork and I was on hold yesterday for an hour and 47 minutes before I reached a human that I needed to reach for my son's healthcare plan. Um, it's a lot. And for me, and I think for so many others, learning to think about the caregiving piece, and that's all the stuff we are doing above and beyond just being a parent, to look at this caregiving piece as a job. Caregiving is a job in addition to parenting. And we can start to get practical about that. We can start to say, this is a job, and like any other job, I am building in time when I am walking away from this. Very often, the stuff is important, but not urgent, and saying, I'm going to be done with this for the day so that I can take my kids to the park, so that we can play with the dog, so that we can make jokes with the boys of whatever that looks like. That is why we are doing this job of caregiving. And we need to be very intentional about putting down the paperwork and the phone calls and the caregiving piece to just be parents so we can find that joy.
Hmm. Yeah. So, in thinking about the bigger picture, what would you like policymakers to know about the daily realities of families like yours?
I would like policymakers to know everything about the daily realities. I wish there were more disabled and neurodivergent people who were the policymakers. Things would be very different if the people using the systems were the ones building the systems. I would like policymakers to know, number one, healthcare is essential for everyone. If the healthcare that you are prepared to settle for your constituents is not something that you would be willing to accept for your own family and your own children, then it is unacceptable for the people who voted you into office. We need robust healthcare that includes respite, that includes living wage for the respite and the home health workers. And we need there not to be all of the barriers in accessing that, the waivers that exist in the US and possibly elsewhere, that you have to jump through hoops to prove that you are disabled. And then in many states, there's a cap on how many people can get the disability based health coverage. There's not a cap on how many people can be disabled. You are denying people life saving services that we should be expecting and entitled to in this country and in every country. Policymakers in every country need to think about first and foremost, if this was my family, would this be acceptable? And if the answer is no, you need to get the answers on what is acceptable from people who have the firsthand experience.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so important. Okay, Kelly. So you've talked about, I think it was on Instagram, about always having to be the expert in the room, the exhaustion that comes with that. So, how do you handle situations when professionals don't take your expertise as a parent seriously?
Being an expert on my child is the one thing that I am confident that I am an expert on. And it can be frustrating when you are being blown off, shuffled through, ignored with your expertise. I am not a neurologist, a geneticist, an educator, a physical therapist. I am not any of these things by trade, but I know my child, and being prepared for an interaction to not go as I might want, and being prepared to jump in every single time you are being discounted is exhausting, but it is necessary. And when we find ourselves with providers that we're going to be seeing on a regular basis, having this confrontation when they are not taking the parent expertise seriously. And therapeutic sessions, you might need a second opinion, you might need a new provider. In school, is it an option to have a different teacher, to involve the special education department? Back to the what are the next steps? Be willing to recognize when the situation you are in, when the person you are working with is not best serving your child, and know that you might have to create what those next steps are. And very often, the best way to do that is talking to other families. Chances are someone else has been through this situation and has a path that worked for them or has paths that do not work that you can learn about and cross those off of your list. Connecting with other families to find the best scenario for your particular location, diagnosis, and family can be the key to a whole lot less exhaustion because you need to build that team who will take you seriously.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think your book will definitely help people, at least guide them in the right direction. What would you say to parents who are just starting their journey? Maybe they just received a diagnosis.
For parents starting this journey, welcome. It's a big community and now you're a part of it. First and foremost, however you are feeling, validate that and allow yourself to feel that. You'll have a lot of people tell you, oh, well, at least this, or oh, the silver lining, or only special people get special children. You know what? All people are special. All children are special. It's just math. In the US alone, 1 in 4 people has a disability. It's just math. Validate your feelings, allow yourself to feel however you are feeling. And when you are ready, connect with a community of others who are sharing this experience. If you do not already know people podcasts. Listen to this podcast backlog. Listen to all of the episodes. You can start to build that community even by something as easy, accessible, and free as listening to podcasts, joining online groups. You will go to therapy appointments and there will be other parents in the waiting room. It might be kind of awkward to be like, hey, I need to make friends. Do you want to be friends? You can word it better, but you will find the community. And within that community, you will find people who acknowledge the hard, people who acknowledge and live in the joy, and who allow you to go through all of the parts of this experience. Is it hard? Yes. The world is not built for people who think differently, who move through the world differently. And if that is your child, it can be a lot to wrap your head around. At the same time, your child is just as wonderful as all the other children. Your path will look different, but on this path, there is so much joy. Be prepared for that. And however you are feeling now, if it is rotten and terrible and all of the things that you don't want to acknowledge, you will feel better. This feeling is not forever. And one day you will be talking to a parent who is where you are now, and you will be able to tell them all of these things.
Mm, yeah. Well, those are really nice words of encouragement for people who might be feeling isolated or overwhelmed and just kind of lost with where to go. All right, Kelly, and where can people find your book and follow your work and connect with your community online?
Yes. So, my book, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child, Your Guide to the Essential Systems, Services, and Supports. Long title, but tells you what it is. It is available at all booksellers online, Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, other at your local bookseller. And the best place to find me and all my socials and everything is my website, kelleycoleman.com. And that's spelled Kelley, Coleman.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And we'll put a link to all of your details in our show notes so people can go find you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me and also for the work that you do. You are changing lives by really building up this community. So thank you for all that you are doing.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. I think this episode is going to be really important for people. We have a lot of parents who reach out to us from around the world and people who are looking for, I think, looking for hope,
Yeah.
looking that for answers and just all of the myths that they hear about what it's like to have a disabled child, right? Like
Yeah.
you were saying before in the beginning about what you didn't know about disability. So I think there's just not enough information out there. And so I think this episode is really going to be helpful for those parents.
And I'm so happy to hear that. And I think, you know, people like myself and others who aren't having the conversation of disability is the best. This is terrific. Like, no, seizures stink. Like, epilepsy is horrible. But disability is hard. It's joyful. It's all of it. And I think kind of making people feel bad that they feel bad isn't the answer. I think it's like, hey, there's a lot of goodness here.
Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoy this podcast and you'd like to support our mission, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. You'll be helping us to continue spreading autism awareness and acceptance around the world. Thanks for listening. Take care.